Sound check. Hey, good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. Nathan Thompson with the Wellness Way Yorkville. Happy Monday, guys. It's good to see you guys all bright and shiny on a Monday, the eve before our election. um, if you are watching right now, let me know. Make sure you say hello. Let me know where you're watching from. Um, and also, if you're watching the replay, go ahead and type in replay just so that I know that you are going back and watching it. So make sure that my sound is on. If you can hear me okay, let me know too. If you can hear me okay. It's really good to see you guys. I really look forward to going live um, every Monday night. Man, I've been going live every Monday night for years and years and years. And the title of today, what I want to go over with you is help. I have so much chronic pain. So make sure that you watch this video. This is specifically for you, for people who suffer, with chronic pain. And I'm going to go over with you a lot of different things as far as what you need to be looking at, why you do need to go a little bit deeper than just maybe just a chiropractic adjustment. But I'm going to go over with you movement, alignment. I'm going to go over with you two labs you should be looking at. I'm going to give you some clinical examples of why this is so important. But I really think that chronic pain is just so mishandled here in the United States. And I'll explain to you why, especially. So, chronic pain, this is absolutely huge. So, make sure you watch this video in its entirety because I'm going to help go a little bit deeper, help you to understand this maybe a little bit better. So, coming up, guys, Tuesday, this is November 19th, which will be before Thanksgiving, is our next inflammation event. And yes, this does have to do a lot with chronic pain, help you to understand this a little bit deeper. But if you do suffer with things like weight loss resistance, you even have cancer, which is really just a toxicity and immune system issue, big time. Problems with your hormones leading to infertility, thyroid issues, arthritis, or chronic joint pain, type 2 diabetes, autoimmunity, or even any kind of hormone imbalance. Guys, make sure that you get registered for this inflammation event. This is specifically for people who are in the Chicagoland area. I'm currently not doing any kind of remote consults, or new ones, I should say, right now, just because we have filled up so much. So if you are from the Chicagoland area, please make sure that you go and you register for this inflammation event. We have a special gift for you at the end. We do it every 3 weeks. And I think it's really, really important to help bridge the gap between here's what's happening in my life and here's where you need to head, and gives you a lot of clarity in regards to that as well. So how you register for that event is just click on the Linktree link. You'll see it on all of our profiles. And if you click on that link, it'll take you to the inflammation event, work with me in person. And all you do is just click on that. That'll take you to Eventbrite, and then you'll be able to register for that event. It takes you probably about a minute to register for that event. And then one of my staff, they'll reach out to you just to confirm, to make sure you are in fact there. We put a lot of time, a lot of effort into making it a great event for you. So make sure that you get registered for that. Please make sure that you do that. Okay. So let's talk about help. I have chronic pain. Now, one of the things I want to ask you guys is, when you think of the word inflammation, in fact, this is one of the first things I talk about in the inflammation event. When you think of, the word inflammation, what words come to mind? So just type it in the comments below if you can. If you think of when you think of the word inflammation, what words come to mind? And everybody usually talks about the same things. They talk about redness, swelling, pain, heat. And you're absolutely right, because those are some of the cardinal signs of inflammation. Okay, they are the cardinal signs of inflammation. However, the problem with that is that we know what acute inflammation is, but we have no idea what chronic inflammation is. Okay, and so if you even look at, well, what does medicine tell you to do when it comes to any kind of inflammation? Is they tell you to try to suppress it as much as possible. This is especially true if you have any kind of acute injury, in which they're saying, oh, well, you need to do ice, probably need to be on some kind of anti-inflammatory, whether it's some kind of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, maybe some kind of steroid, and you need to rest it. Okay. And in fact, this is why if you have any kind of like acute joint injury or any kind of injury, this is actually the worst thing that you can do for it, especially. Now, if it becomes chronic, then they'll probably want you to go on some kind of SSRI, and it'd be amazing how many. I'm just amazed at how many people come in and they're on some kind of selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor or some kind of antidepressant, and it makes me wonder, because I'm like, this person's suffering with chronic joint pain. Why would they put them on an SSRI? And then I discovered that people typically, if you have chronic pain, it makes you sad, and it can actually make the pain feel worse, because remember, pain is not objective. It's subjectively analyzed by the brain. And if you have a lot of pain, then they just want you to be happy. Maybe if you're happier, you won't have as much pain, but that's not the reason why the pain is actually starting in the first place. So medicine tells you to suppress it, suppress it, suppress it. So I want to ask you guys a question. How do you get a baby to stop crying? And having a young, I don't want to say he's a baby now, but he's about 20 months old, so he does cry. But if he's crying, how do you get a baby to stop crying? Here's what you can actually do. You can, number one, you can cut out their tongue, or number two, you can figure out the reason why they are crying. Which one sounds like a kind of a better option, right? Because you can cut out the baby's tongue and they won't be able to cry anymore. Or you can try to figure out, well, what's the reason why they are crying? And guys, even if you look at what medicine does when it talks to chronic pain, maybe the body's trying to tell you something. Maybe the body is giving you a signal that something is not right. And in fact, if you look at what a lot of medicine does, is they just try to hush it. They try to suppress it. Or if you have your check engine light that's going off, they're just like, well, just put some tape over it, and then, it goes away. And you can't see the check engine light anymore, but your body, your car, is giving you a warning sign that something isn't right. And if you put some tape over it, you're not going to see it, but it doesn't mean that you've taken care of the problem. Yet that's what we're actually taught, is that inflammation is bad. And in fact, the biggest thing is once you figure out the reason why you're so inflamed in the first place, or the reason why you have so much chronic pain and things like that, but putting a piece of tape over the check engine light, that's not the right approach, especially because eventually what's going to happen is, if you ignore that check engine light, then everything is going to tank. And that's what we see happening in today's healthcare, especially. I think that doctors do in my opinion, a horrible job. In fact, a lot of natural health practitioners do a horrible job, because they just say, well, just take some turmeric or some ginger or something, then all your problems are going to go away. I'm like, no, it goes a lot deeper than that. But this is why medicine says, yeah, just put a piece of tape over it, and then, all those things actually go away. But we're seeing how much chronic pain disability is taking place, especially here in the United States. So you don't want to just cut out the tongue. If your body is giving you a signal, a warning sign, you don't want to just cut out the tongue of a crying baby and then think that all your problems are actually better. We do a really, really poor job, of that. And no, this is not like, oh, just go ahead and get adjusted, because I'm going to go way deeper than that today, especially. Now, here's an interesting article that came out about 2.5 years ago. And the title of the article is this: Anti-inflammatory medications raise the risk of chronic back pain in patients. Isn't that interesting? Because if you have a back injury, the first thing they say is just stay off of it, just rest it, and eventually it'll go away. Well, it may go away, or it may not go away. That's one of the biggest things. So when I talk to you about issues with the joints, we talk about the pain, and things like that, I'm going to show you, here's what you really, really need to be doing. But I find this interesting that, and this is not the only article that's ever come out, because I've talked about, people with chronic headaches. So I go on, things like Advil, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, and how if you go on it long enough, it actually will be causing the chronic issues, especially. So anti-inflammatory medications raise the risk of chronic back pain in patients. Now listen to this, okay? Here's what they said when they looked at this article. Subjects who showed a higher percentage of neutrophils, which are immune cells that are responsible and they actually are activated in the presence of tissue damage or bacterial infection, things like that. So showed a higher percentage of neutrophils to help heal the injury in their white blood cells during the acute stage of pain had a lower risk of chronic pain later on in life. So if you had a healthy immune response, then you had a lower risk of chronic pain later on in life. What they also said was this: we have clearly demonstrated that if the immune response is not strong enough, chronic pain is quite common after an acute episode, independently from other factors. Guys, this is why having a healthy immune response is so absolutely critical. Okay. Now, what can cause a lowered immune system response? Well, there's a lot of things, but let me talk about the big movers and shakers. Number one is stress. Mental and physical stress. This is why we talk about the inflammation event. Mental, physical, and chemical, how all those things can stress the body, can lower the immune response, especially. Here's another thing that can lower the immune system response: lots of sugar. Lots of sugar. And it's no wonder we call it the flu season, because now that we're done with Halloween and all of these kids and probably a lot of their parents are dousing themselves with so much sugar. How does sugar affect the immune system? Well, how it affects the immune system is it affects neutrophils. And so if you actually look at the receptors for vitamin C, especially on neutrophils, you actually see that those receptors are very similar to glucose receptors, which means that if you douse yourself with a lot of sugar, those neutrophils will take in the glucose and cause a lot of oxidative damage. And in fact, I've done talks, in the past about fasting and things like that, how a high sugar intake will cause a delayed response or almost paralyze those neutrophils for many hours after that high exposure to sugar. So sugar will cause a lot of problems with those neutrophils that are responsible for tissue repair and that are also responsible for bacterial infections and things like that. And then finally, you have a lack of sleep. We're just finishing up the sleep challenge with the Wellness Way in October, which is responsible for repair and recovery. Now, people will say, Dr. Nate, do you get any testing done? Yep, I just finished up some testing and did a male panel on me. Want to look at a lot of inflammatory markers, look at my immune system, and do that. Inflammatory markers very low, immune system doing absolutely wonderful. Doesn't mean I don't have anything to work on, but I'm always testing. I'm always testing in order to see how I need to make myself better, especially. So if you want to lower your immune response, have a lot of stress, make sure you skimp on sleep, and then eat a lot of sugar, especially. Now, the reason why I know that some of these people suffer from this is because going back and going through the pandemic, whatever you want to call it, or COVID proved this. Because if you want to see a lot of people who got bowled over by a virus, it wasn't everybody. It was the people who had the lowest immune system response. And think of this: their answer wasn't to try to strengthen those people who had a very poor immune system response. It was to weaken the environment for everybody. That's the biggest problem that I had. And, people are surprised when I say, who'd you vote for? And I'm like, I voted for those, for the candidates who allowed us to have the freedom to be able to choose. You didn't actually force something on us. And because the whole idea was to force something on us in order to try to weaken the environment with everybody rather than to make the individual person strong. This is why individual responsibility, especially when it comes to your health, is so important. But their answer wasn't to try to make people stronger. It was to try to weaken the environment for everybody. And you saw how well that worked, especially. Okay. So when you talk about chronic pain, here's the three biggest things that I want you to start to look at. Number one, look at alignment. Number two, look at movement. Number three, I'm going to go over with you some lab values of what you need to be looking at that can cause a lot of chronic pain and things like that. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is alignment, how you are aligned and how things are aligned with gravity. Okay. Let me give you an example, because a lot of people do this. I see. Let's say, you go and you work out, and let's say you squat. And let's say, because I've done the You Don't Know Squat Challenge. If you followed me through that, thank you very much. But you can go back and watch that video on how to improve your squat. It should be up on all our social media. But let's say you start squatting and then your knee starts barking a little bit because you have improper squat mechanics. You lack poor ankle and hip flexibility, mobility, and then the thing that barks the most is probably going to be your knees. So then your knees start barking, and then your answer is well, maybe if I just rest it. And then you rest it for 3 to 4 weeks, take some time off, and you come back. You're like, oh, it feels so much better. And as soon as you squat again, then you notice, oh, it's just starting to bark at me again, and it's starting to have a lot of pain and things like that. But we never do anything in order to get to the reason why it's happening. So let's say that you're driving your car and then you pull your car into the garage and you notice, oh man, my wheels are really wearing down abnormally. This isn't very right. And rather than fix the alignment, then here's your solution, because this is how you do it in everyday life. You just decide to park your car in the garage and not drive it for the next 6 months. Then 6 months later, you come out and you look at your tires and you're like, oh, I did a great job. Tires aren't wearing down anymore. But that's not the point. Point is, if you don't drive it, things aren't going to wear down. And the problem is that maybe the tires are out of alignment. Maybe the problem that you have is your body is in a poor alignment, especially in relation to gravity and things like that. Now, guys, this is why imaging can be so important, because here's a young woman who is really, really struggling with a lot of pain, a lot of spine pain, a lot of pain all over her body. Yes, we did some labs on her. There were some things that were going on. But if you even take x-rays and you looked at the neck x-rays, let's talk about alignment. Here's the eyes, here's the teeth, here's the back of the head. And this person is looking to the left. And then if you look at each of the bones into the neck, where you see it outlined with the black line, that red line that you see there, that red line is normal. Okay. So this is why alignment is so important. In fact, even if you look at her lower back, you can see this is the belly, this is the back of the spine, this is the very lowest part of the spine. And you can see by the black line of where she's at and the red line how it's supposed to line up with those things. This is why, guys, having proper curves is so important, especially when it talks to the spine. Because when you're talking about a spine, it's not just a joint, it's housing your spinal cord. And in fact, if you understand anatomy and how the spinal cord is actually tethered at the very top, anytime that you are losing curves, you are causing a stretching of the spinal cord, and it's putting the body in a chronic state of stress, putting your neurology in a chronic state of stress. This is also why it can cause a lot of disc issues, because without proper curves, that can cause deterioration of the disc, especially. So if you look at the black line, you can see where she's at, and the red line is anatomically normal where it's supposed to line up. Who says so? Look at any anatomical textbook, and you'll see that there are curves that have to take place. This has also been verified by chiropractic biophysics, Pettibon, things like that. And they talk about the biomechanics of having a curves in the spine from the side and how important they are for normal function, not only when it comes to having chronic pain, but also when it comes to having normal neurological function as well. So you can see that when she started out, she was really, really in a bad place, especially. And then, after about 6 weeks, she got dramatically better. But that was a physical problem. But there also could be some chemical reasons why people have chronic pain as well. So that's why alignment is so important. Here's another interesting example. Here's the belly. Here's the back. This is a lower back x-ray. This black line is actually where this person is lined up, and that red line is normal. And you want those two lines to match up as close as possible. This was a young, not an older individual, so someone I think mid-30s, who had suffered with back pain, chronic back pain for 14 years. And in fact, by the time he came into me, he was almost completely just an invalid. He was wearing a back brace. He was in a cane and could hardly walk, couldn't work, and was literally getting ready to lose his job, lose his house, lose everything, because he just couldn't do anything anymore. Now, we took some x-rays on him. This is his x-ray 6 weeks later, and you can actually see how much his x-ray started to follow that line. And you know what the cool thing is when we took that x-ray, this person was completely back to normal, completely back to working out, deadlifting, doing some just amazing things, completely back to work. And he was doing good. And the only thing that we did is we got things moving the way they were supposed to, and we started to line him up with gravity. Okay. So alignment is very important, guys, and people just don't think about that, enough. If your body is not in the right alignment, it just wears down faster. This is why for some people, I look at their x-ray and I'm like, you probably should take it easy doing a lot of jumping or bounding or anything like that, because you're just going to wear things out a whole heck of a lot sooner, especially because things will wear down quickly if you're not lined up properly to gravity. So you have to look at alignment. Then number two, you have to think of movement. Your joints need to move, and if they don't move, they'll start to deteriorate. Now, this is why I will always say this. If you injure a joint, you should start safely moving it immediately. Immediately. I'm talking about as soon as the injury happens, start safely, meaning you're not going to injure it again, and start moving it as quickly as possible. Motion is life to every single joint. Now, this right here, if you look at this, this is an ankle sprain. The reason why I say this is because if you sprain your ankle, what's some of the things that you would think that you would need to do? People say I should rest, ice, compress, elevate. And in fact, you know that the whole Rice method hasn't been proven with science, but that's just something you were taught that you're supposed to do, and you follow it and you do it just because that's what other people told you to do. Now, the reason why I talk about an ankle sprain is because I had some doozies, when I was younger. A catastrophic ankle sprain when I was about 13 years of age, like a grade 2, grade 3 sprain that almost ruptured the whole entire ligaments. It was a nasty, nasty sprain. No doubt about it. And yes, it hurt. It was very, very painful. It was so painful, I threw up. That's how much it actually hurt. But I remember I went and they took x-rays. There was no fracture that was going on. And I remember the doctor said this: we're going to go ahead and cast it for 3 weeks. And I'm going to tell you something. That was the worst thing that could have happened, was that it was casted for 3 weeks, because the whole idea was, well, we're just going to let the whole thing cast, fibrose, heal back together, and then we'll deal with it later. And in fact, that was the premier medicine of the day to do that. And now they figured it out. We were doing it all wrong. We were doing it all completely wrong. And that's why I love people, who are so sure, who are so certain of certain medical procedures, that they think, well, this is just the way it goes. And then it changes a couple of years later. And this is why, we can only go according to the speed of science. Well, guys, you're either going to think that the body is stupid or the body is smart. And if you think that the body is intelligent and smart, that will always catch up with the speed of science. But this is why you should start moving it right. And in fact, people come in, they're like, oh, I sprained my ankle. What should I do? I'm like, start to be able to move it as much as possible. That will actually push this swelling out. Don't ice it, because you need that inflammatory response, because the inflammatory response is what's there in order to help it to be able to heal. And I've actually taken people with acute ankle sprains and I've adjusted it in the right vector of force, not in the wrong vector, but in the right vector of force. And what's so amazing is that these people recover so much quicker than if they would have just plopped it up on the couch, iced it, and just immobilized it for as much as possible. So you need to move it, be able to move it safely, which leads me to this. If you've ever broken a bone, yes, it should be casted. Okay. It should be casted. But if you've ever broken your arm and the doctor said, hey, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put a cast on. Let's say they put a cast on your arm for 6 weeks. Then when they take the cast off, how does it feel? How does that feel? Well, where you had the cast is going to be stiff. It's going to be weak. It's going to be atrophy of the muscles involved. And it's probably going to be very painful. So if you took the cast off and then immediately you go to your doctor and like, doc, look at my arm. It's very stiff, weak, and it's painful. They wouldn't say that you had degenerative arthritis. The first thing the doctor would say is maybe you need to start moving it and start strengthening it a little bit more. But how many times when we have a joint that's stiff or it's weak or it's painful, first thing that we do is, rather than figure out why it's happening, we just start limiting ourselves as much as we need to do, or we just call it age or whatever it might be. And then you just notice that it just continues to get worse and worse and worse. And this is why motion is so important. Okay. Now, even when we talk about what we do here in the office, even if someone has an acute injury or something like that, we try to get them to move as quickly as possible. So this is why, for people, why we'll have them do things like repetitive cervical traction. I'm not going to explain it. You can go ahead and you can look what repetitive cervical traction does. This is why doing a wobble chair is so important, because it starts to induce normal motion in the lower part of the back and in through the spine. That's why movement is so important, guys. And then adjustments. with the right vector of force. This is why I can't I can't, like stress that enough is what I mean by the right vector of force, meaning if you have a loss of curve in your lower part of the back, then it should actually be worked on pushing forward. You should work on your exercise of trying to move it forward. But if you have a sway back or you have like a spondylolisthesis or a fractured L5 and it causes an increase in curve, then any chiropractor that's trying to force it down and pushing in the wrong vector will only cause it to hurt even more. And this is why, guys, yep, it is one of my beefs of how many doctors take x-rays, but they do nothing with them. They're not actually looking at the x-ray to say, how should I adjust this person? What do they need from a lab value? How do I lower down the inflammation? They're just not doing that. In fact, I will actually say there's many chiropractors who are so intellectually lazy that I would never go to them, or I would never send my family to them ever at all. And that's why you need to make sure that someone knows what they're doing as far as adjustments with the right vector and the right direction of force, and also should be supported by doing some level of home exercises in order to keep it moving as much as possible. The reason why every single person, even if someone comes in and they're just like, they're coming from 4 hours away and they just are just labs and there's no way that I can see them, I'll even tell them you need to be doing some of your home exercises to start to move in order to reduce and improve alignment and improve mobility, especially, and so every single person should do that. Guys, I will actually tell you, you need to move a lot more than what you think you are, probably 10 times more as well. Okay. So what are some lab values associated with increased pain? So I'm going to go over some lab values of what you should be looking at as well. Okay. So I had an individual, who came in suffering with a lot of joint pain. And she brought in her labs and I looked at those and I'm like, where's the rest of them? She's like, this is all they did. I'm like, well, why is this all they did? She said, the reason why is because my doctor wanted to check my lipids because he wants me to go on a cholesterol medication. But the problem is, completely didn't test any of the things of why she had fatigue, poor energy, lots of joint pain that were going on. But here's some of the things that you should be looking at, or they should actually be getting tested. First one is high sensitivity C-reactive protein. This is an inflammatory marker in your body. When does high sensitivity C-reactive protein, when does it elevate? When there's inflammation that's going on. It will elevate if you have, some kind of infection that's going on. And it also would be elevated in people who carry a lot of body fat as well. And you'll see it elevate if you're carrying infection, whether it's even in the stool, within the gastrointestinal system. But if you look at people with autoimmunity like rheumatoid arthritis, they're typically running high levels of C-reactive protein. That number should be under 1. But I've seen some people be at 50, and yes, they were running an infection at that point. And guess what happened? Every joint in their body hurt during that time. So you need to be checking your high sensitivity C-reactive protein. I just measured mine. Mine was under 1. Number 2, you should also be looking at homocysteine, which is also an inflammatory marker. You should be looking at homocysteine. They don't measure this all that much, but if you start seeing it climb above 15, typically people are going to have a lot of issues with a lot of joint pain and things like that. And in fact, these two markers are also highly associated with elevations of things like cerebrovascular accidents and also heart disease or heart attacks, things like that, independent of what your cholesterol levels are at, especially. This is why when you look at high sensitivity C-reactive protein, why they have found that even if someone didn't even have any kind of abnormal cholesterol or anything like that, but that remained elevated, they had a lot more incidence of heart attack, especially. High sensitivity C-reactive protein, homocysteine. And then another thing too is check your average blood sugars, which are going to be your A1C. Let me ask you a question. Because even this person that brought their labs in, doctors didn't even run A1C. They just measured a fasting glucose levels and it was still elevated. But if your average blood sugars are running high, reason why I say AGEs, it stands for advanced glycation end stages. If you have elevated blood sugars, that's going to cause a lot of damage to your soft tissues. What do I mean by soft tissues? Think of your joints. Also think of your kidneys too. And in fact, if you look at people who are getting all of the joint replacements, it's the people with blood sugar issues. I mean, it really is the people who are having blood sugar issues because what happens is some of those proteins get damaged and the sugar just attached to it, and it causes an immune system response. Will cause a lot of joint issues, especially. It's why you need to be looking at your average blood sugars, and it really should. If you look at your hemoglobin A1C, it should be lower than having pre-diabetes. It really should be, under 5.4 ideally, because what they have found is under 5.4 causes the least amount of brain atrophy. And then the other thing is are you dealing with any kind of infection, or what about your hormones? Okay, what about your hormones? Because I know a lot of menopausal women, if they're dealing with frozen shoulder, they're dealing with that, they want to blame the low estradiol levels. But I will actually tell you this. If you look at postmenopausal women and how that the decrease in estradiol can cause some issues when it comes with women catching up when it comes to heart disease, and things like that, and all my joints hurt and things like that. There's got to be a reason for the joints to hurt or for the joints to get inflamed. And usually one of the things is there was a problem with alignment or movement, and the loss of hormones just revealed that the problem was actually already there. So that's why I always say, if you're going into menopause, make sure that you get your lifestyle in order, because if you don't, the menopause will give you a really, really bad day, especially. I'm going to go over some lab values, and this right here, if you look at this, these are some things that I actually ran. And here's an individual who suffered with massive depression, fibromyalgia, terrible, terrible joint pain. And we did some of the lab testing. You can see she was she actually was diabetic. So her hemoglobin A1C is at 7.0. C-reactive protein is just extremely high, off the charts, so massively inflamed. And in fact, when I looked at this, my jaw dropped, because her homocysteine level was above 50, and it was so high, the lab just we don't even measure it when it gets that high. So I've never seen anyone with that high of a homocysteine level. I have seen someone have very, very high homocysteine levels, and this was after a specific Jimmy jab that the administration that's actually trying to get reelected right now, tried to force you to get in order to keep your job, especially which are like, yeah, but I'm doing my job remotely. I'm not around people. And they still wanted to force you to get it, because I saw that number jump up, and you can go ahead and watch that video on Rumble. Hopefully you can find it. It's been pirated so many times. If you just type that in, and if you don't know what it is, just send me a message. But homocysteine levels are through the roof. And guys, if you see homocysteine levels that high, there is a real, real big problem with methylation. Huge problem with methylation and with detoxes, as well. So she was just becoming just an absolute nightmare when it came to toxicity and methylation and things like that. And here were her x-rays. So if you see her x-rays, you can see just how badly her joints had deteriorated. So this is her x-ray. The black line is her, the red line is normal. And then if you look at the x-ray looking at her from the back, this would be her left hip, this would be her right hip. Here's her spine as it goes up, and how is that lined up with gravity? Absolutely horrible. And well, what's all this right here? I can't get rid of that on an x-ray, because that were surgical clips, because she had all kinds of gastrointestinal issues. You think she had a lot of chronic pain? Absolutely. So when she started doing the right things, in a matter of about 6 weeks, she went from hardly be able to get out of bed to she started CrossFitting. Isn't that amazing? Scaled, of course, because people are like, oh, I can't do that. And I'm like, yeah, you can, because you can scale. You can scale the movement, but you need to be moving. And she got back in the gym and was able to do that. Just an absolute miracle story. But this was so medically mismanaged. It was just absolutely incredible. And she was able to make a recovery through just doing the right approach, especially. So guys, what causes chronic pain? If you have chronic pain right now, you're not going to find the answer on another drug, another medication, or another miracle surgery. You have to start looking at what can be causing chronic pain. I had a woman today, she came to me, she's like, oh, everything hurts again. I'm like, well, tell me about the mental stress that you have. And she's like, how long do you have? So mental stress can cause it, chemical stressors and physical stressors by looking at the x-ray and running some markers. But guys, I will tell you this, guys, people are so mentally stressed right now, and that will make chronic pain worse. This is why you have to talk about it, because women stress out way more than men, and mental stress will affect a woman's hormones way more than it'll affect a man's health, only because of how mental stress affects hormones and cortisol, progesterone, all those different things. And this is why this is so important. Ladies, you got to get your mental stress under control. Okay. So, Dr. Nate, what would you start doing? Number one, start getting x-rays. Okay. So start getting some imaging in order to see what's going on. Number two, get some appropriate labs done. And this is not some of the labs I looked at is not the only thing that I would be looking at. We would be looking at probably looking at food allergies, because it's a huge inflammatory trigger, looking at your digestion, maybe even doing a stool test, but running some markers in order to see why on earth you are so inflamed. And then number three, start moving correctly. Start moving correctly and start working on fixing your lifestyle. Can't stress that enough. And guys, you're just not a teaspoon away of turmeric from, all of your problems going away, which so many people want. Okay. And let me give you a final thought. If you had a pebble in your shoe and you were walking, do you need to take anti-pebble medication? I really want you to think about that. If you had a pebble in your shoe and it was really irritating your foot, would you just say, you know what, I'm just going to take some anti-pebble medication? Or would you take your shoe off, reach down and remove the pebble from your shoe? I know you know the answer to that, but it goes without saying, guys, if you have a physical problem, you need a physical solution. If you have a chemical problem, you need a chemical solution. And this is why handling inflammation from a physical, mental, and chemical perspective is so important. And in fact, in the Wellness Way, we're the only doctors that are actually trying to tackle this. And we're doing a pretty doggone good job of doing it, especially. Now, the other thing I'm going to tell you is this, is a lot of people come in just thinking that they need an oil change, when in reality, they need a whole engine overhaul. So don't expect an oil change when you need a whole engine overhaul. But the biggest thing that I will tell you is put your head down and start doing the work. You need to get tested first and foremost, and then you need to start doing the work for a long period of time in order to be able to stimulate a change, especially. Do the work. Do the work. Nobody cares. Just keep working hard, but do it the right way. That's the most important approach. And this is why when we look at things, we take a Swiss watch approach to everything. Guys, this is why you need to look at all of these systems, and you need to see how they are all working together. The muscular system, the immune system. And this is why even what I just talked about is I talked about the immune system, the skeletal system, the circulatory system. I talked about all of those different things and how they work together. But this is why you really need to be finding someone who knows how to look at all these things together rather than just looking at one thing, the joints. They look at the joints. Oh, the joints are inflamed. Give you some non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, some corticosteroids, maybe something even harsher. The joint pain goes down. They said, see, we did our job. But they're not looking at the big picture of how it's affecting everything else. This is why I say, did you know your big toe controls your heart? You sit there and you laugh. And I'm like, come here, take your shoe off. Give me a hammer. I'll smash your big toe, then take your blood pressure afterwards. And then, everything starts to work together. This is why we say is this. Here's a final thought. A specialist is someone who knows more and more about less and less until finally they become experts in nothing. Let me say that again. A specialist is someone who knows more and more about less and less until finally they are experts in nothing. And I know that some people are like, well, I'm going to go to the specialist. And I'm like, the specialist in what? Who knows more and more about less and less until finally they're experts in nothing. And then a year later, they come back with all the same problems, but they're just on more drugs as a result. You need to build health rather than just trying to remove symptoms. There's a big difference between the two. So guys, when you talk about movement, alignment, and talk about labs, my question is what are you going to do with it? Are you going to just sit by, and are you just going to continue to suffer, or are you going to do something about it? And if you're from the Chicagoland area, then take that step and come on out to our inflammation event Tuesday, November 19th at 6:00 p.m. This is an in-person event. All you need to do is just go to our Linktree profile. You'll see the first thing that pop up. Go ahead and click that button right there. And then you'll be able to register on our Eventbrite page, and you'll be registered, in about 60 seconds. And if you do that, we'll be reaching out to you to make sure that you are in fact going to come to that event. If you also go onto our link tree, you'll see that we have all kinds of free, awesome resources for you as well. The No Sugar Nutrition Guide, as you can even order one of our sassy t-shirts that we have, on display. And I'm always thankful when people do that, as well, because it means that you just support our efforts and you support what we're trying to do online, especially guys. When I run things online, this takes 3 to 4 hours a week, and then to pay for streaming software. I know Monday nights I don't get to see much of my family, but I'm happy to do it if it means that I can help you improve your life, and it does something to improve your life, especially. And so, guys, I'm always thankful when you support us. Download the free stuff that we have. Please get a t-shirt too, but make sure you get registered for that inflammation event that's going to be coming up Tuesday, November 19th, just in a couple of weeks, 2 weeks from tomorrow. Okay. So, guys, help. I have chronic pain. I just gave you the first steps of what you need to start looking at it. And the biggest thing that I can tell you is just get to work and start putting in the work. Find a wellness way. If you don't have a wellness way, if you're not from the Chicagoland area, make sure you go to wellnessway.com. Find someone to work with you. Well, a lot of them will work remotely as well. But if you are from the Chicagoland area, then make sure that you work with us. We would love the opportunity and the privilege to be able to work with you and to make your life better. So I have chronic pain. This is the first thing that you need to do in order to start making it better. So I hope you found value with this. I hope you do something about it more than anything else. And guys, make sure that you share this video as well. Share this video with other people, because there's a lot of people who are suffering, and make sure that you let them know this is the first steps that you need to do. And most importantly, be a good example. Be a good example for them. So next week, I'll probably be doing a question and answer live, if we're actually still around. A lot of people came to me. They're like, what's going to happen tomorrow? I'm like, I think it'll be interesting when it comes to that. And yes, I did vote for Trump, as an FYI. And some people like, I'm going to unfollow you. I'm like, is that really a surprise? Is that really a surprise for you? Because if that's a surprise for you, then what universe have you been watching me from? So I follow the Constitution. I follow freedom. Freedom. Just remember this. Vote for the one that gives you the most constitutional freedom. I voted for the one that didn't mandate anything that I believe hurt a lot of people as a result. So chronic pain, guys, get to it. Reach out to me if you have any questions. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. I hope you guys enjoy this week. Remember, live every day in the moment. Enjoy it. And as I always say, remember who you are. So guys, be well, be blessed. We will talk to you guys very soon. Thank you so much for watching, and be well.